Hello there. In addition to Carole Ann Ford, another actor to have portrayed the Doctor is celebrating a birthday today, also on June 8th, and that's Colin Baker. That's him as the sixth incarnation of the Doctor, next to my new little model TARDIS. Uh, Even Colin Baker himself thought, as the staff of Doctor Who did at the time, he played the Doctor from 1985 to actually late 1986. There's a bit of a story behind that. He was the only Doctor to have been fired from the role. It's a long and complicated story. You should look it up on YouTube sometime. But anyway, one of the chief objections was his bad attitude, the fact that he was depicted as almost strangling his companion, Perpigillium Perry Brown, played by Nicola Bryant, and this jacket, which I actually love. I think it's very much in the Tom Baker tradition. Nothing matches, very bohemian, very much in the Doctor Who spirit. But a lot of people who have an anti-80s itis, as I call it, problem, did not like that. I think there'll be some revision in later years. Anyway, today I am going to be talking to you about these. The Colin Baker DVDs that I actually have. Now, as you'll know, Colin Baker actually made two more stories than this as Doctor Who, including The Twin Dilemma, which I've rented but don't actually own, and what was it called? There's so many Daleks ones with similar titles. His Dalek story. I'm sorry. I know the name of it, but it's not coming to my head right now. Probably remember it as I get into this review. Too bad. Whovian, not remembering the name of a Doctor Who story. But anyway, this is the first story that I have by him. Now, the format of Doctor Who changed. Traditionally, it had been, a number of 25-minute serials. In this point, the Doctor Who stories were actually two 45-minute serials, equaling out roughly to about, the typical 90, 99 minutes apiece. But this is the Attack of the Cybermen. It's a little slow at first, but actually it's one of the better Cybermen stories, as it actually deals with a sociological element of their society. And it's not a bad story. I'll show you the inside of the DVD. It actually, since I ordered it from Amazon, it has the original card in it. And there's Colin Baker's face on it as the Doctor. And production stills from that episode. Now, there's been a special edition made of this, but I have not gotten it yet. This is actually one of my favorite Sixth Doctor stories, Vengeance on Varos. This actually predicts, by about 2 decades, the emergence of reality television, used as a blood sport. In the background is my favorite Doctor Who villain from this era, Syl. Actually, I have quite a thing about Sabalom Glitz. He's kind of like Harry Mudd from Star Trek, but he's not really a villain, just a kind of a misguided rogue for the most part. Perry here gets transformed into a bird-like creature in this episode. And the Doctor actually is tortured. This is an episode that got a lot of flack from people at the BBC, like Michael Gray, controller at the time, and Mary Whitehouse, who felt the show was getting too violent. The Doctor actually throws a character in an acid bath and kills him in this episode. The Doctor becomes a killer. This is not, and I repeat, not a story for children. There's a lot of sadomasochistic references and violence in this story, but inevitably the theme is that violence is ultimately self-defeating. But that's neither here nor there. Similar picture of Colin Baker on the DVD. The Mark of the Rani. Now, while the Master had been a male protagonist of the Doctor, the Rani is the female protagonist. She is the epitome of an unethical scientist who doesn't have a care who she hurts in her experiments and what she does to them. And in this story, Uh, she materializes near the coal pits of Killingsworth in 19th century England during the Luddite Rebellion and attempts to curry favor with the people of that time to accomplish her experiments, and the Doctor is trying to stop her. Now, it's an excellent story, but kind of a love it or hate it story because a lot of people just don't like Colin Baker. Actually, I'm going to tell you, I haven't heard these brilliant Big Finish stories he's done where the Doctor's character changes from naughty to nice, as it were. But I love Colin Baker because he's so different than the other Doctors. He's a little more like Q on Star Trek, a little more arrogant. He also reminds me of Lenny Henry as Chef Gareth Blackstock on Chef. All you BBC fans might know that show very well. He's temperamental. He's a bit edgy, but in the end, he's really a very good man. It's proof that nice doesn't always equal out to good, and vice versa. So I rather like this Doctor, and I wish he'd stayed on a little longer to develop into a more well-rounded kind of character. This is the Two Doctors. This is another very creepy story. You could actually call it grimdark, where the second Doctor, in his last year of life, Patrick Troughton, you notice a little gray hair in his head, is actually portrayed as being co-opted by a cannibalistic android named Shockeye, and he goes around to 1980s Spain, where he not only kills a waiter, but tries to order human flesh. Another very adult-oriented story. It's a very good one, featuring the Sixth and the Second Doctor. An unlikely combination is they're very different characters. The Second Doctor is a very amusing and kind of character. Very nice, and the Sixth Doctor is good, as I said, but not always that nice. But it's a very good story. Again, more for the adults. And inside, you have the title card, the reply card, the first DVD. I love that orange background they use on a lot of William Hartnell's on both. Alright, now this is going to stir a lot of controversy up. I get so tired of people calling something a B movie, essentially because it's from the 80s, and it has color, and it has imagination, and it has creativity, like Xanadu. I don't consider that a B movie at all. I love it, and not on an ironic level. I want to repeat that, and this is an episode I love, for the same reason. The reasons why most people hate it. They say, oh, well, if they like this episode, they say it's because, well, it's so bad it's good. This is just plain good. I mean, it's got H.G. Wells. It's got this beautiful, time lash interior with sparkling caves. I mean, just because it isn't grimdark and typical of the 1990s, which I won't get into it, but is apparently the best decade in the world, according to most people, because it was dark and edgy. This is none of that. Very colorful, very theatrical. This is Time Lash. Voted in poll after poll after poll as being the worst Doctor Who video DVD story ever made. There's even a bonus feature on here where the staff tried to justify how bad it is in hindsight. And it's a great story. I recommend it to any Doctor Who fan, and watch it without prejudice. Don't get anti-80s itis into your head. It's a common problem with Colin Baker. He so represents the 80s look, and if you don't like that, then you might not want to watch any of his stories, especially this one. Couldn't get any more 80s than this, and I love it. Not with irony. Great story. Business reply card again. If this goes out of print, I don't see a special edition coming out, so right now it's still available. Now this, Colin Baker was temporarily taken off the air as Doctor Who because, for different reasons aside from him, nothing to do with him, they decided that they didn't want to have Doctor Who on for 18 months, so they didn't do a second series with Colin Baker. They came back in December 86 for his finale, The Trial of a Time Lord, where, kind of figuratively, he goes back to Gallifrey with one of the best opening sequences ever, special effects-wise, in Doctor Who, over the Time Lord space station. Almost like George Lucas. And generally speaking, it's not a bad special effects in the rest of it either. But anyway, this is actually a sort of series that is interlinked with trial segments, and then the stories come from there. And this is the box set it comes in. It's a thicker box than most. Didn't get it that expensively. Here are some stills from some of those episodes. And here is the first story, The Trial of a Time Lord. Part 1 through 4, The Mysterious Planet. This is the introduction of Sabalom Glitz, I was talking about earlier. This is one of the last stories for Nicole Bryant as Terry. If you open it up, there's the business card and the DVD. Again, let me put this DVD back where I sat. I know I can store these as separate DVDs, but it's actually all part of a series. This is Mind Warp. Actually a very good story. I love the opening with the twin planets and the pastel sun. The Doctor is actually manipulated by Syl to reject and neglect Perry, who is believed to have been killed at the end of this story. And the whole theme is that the Doctor's prosecution is a man called the Valeyard, who for some reason has the intention of slamming the Doctor down really, really hard. Let me put this back again. I'm trying to get all this in the screen so you can see it. Here is the Terror of the Vervoids, the debut of Bonnie Langford as Mel. Now, I know a lot of people don't think she was much of a companion, but, you know, I like her time on Doctor Who, you know. She kind of had a British Lucille Ball kind of way about her. This is a very good social story about what kind of life people value. The Vervoids are actually genetically engineered sentient flora, as it were. And that is the next to the last part of Trial of a Time Lord. Now, this is the last part called The Ultimate Foe. It's a little two-parter, including Anthony Ainley as the Master, and it takes place inside the mind of the Doctor. We find out who the Valeyard is and his relationship to the Doctor. As Riversong would say, spoilers! So, I won't give you any. Actually, this is quite a good little story. And actually, if you're a fan of Keeping Up Appearances with Patricia Rutledge, the man who played Onslow in that show, plays a brief role in this as well. And that's the inside of the DVD of that. And that represents the Trial of a Time Lord. Sadly, Colin Baker was fired from the series after that aired, and he actually didn't get to come back for a regeneration sequence. They merely just put Sylvester McCoy in a blonde wig and his suit for the regeneration, since you didn't see much of his face in Time and the Ronnie. So I think Colin Baker got rather shafted, but he did get to come back for Big Finish and continue the story of his Doctor in audio programs, which was wonderful because he was a Doctor whose dreams were deferred. He wanted to actually, I hear, play the role longer than Tom Baker, which would have been interesting. I would have loved to have seen him play the role out in the 80s and develop, but he didn't get that chance. And Colin Baker is one of my favorite incarnations of the Doctor, the Sixth. And today, we'd like to celebrate Colin Baker's birthday. And I hope you have a good one.